What's up, guitar players? If you are like me, you are probably somewhat obsessed with Stevie Ray Vaughan. You might even be able to remember what you were doing, where you were at when you first heard Stevie Ray Vaughan. So if that's you, if that sounds like you, this will be a great lesson for you because I'm going to be breaking down 4 techniques that will help you sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan. Can I guarantee that you're going to walk away directly after this video and just be crushing it exactly like Stevie Ray Vaughan? I can't guarantee that, but these techniques are definitely going to get you to sound more like him, introduce his flavors into your own playing, and they're basically going to come in the form of licks, and I think they're going to be really applicable to your playing, especially if you like the blues. They're going to be super, super applicable right away. So we're going to go through them, and then I will show you how you can introduce them into your solos, and then you can run with it and take this for yourself and try to impress as many people as you can with these techniques. So really quick, I will say that in the description, there is a free downloadable PDF with all of these licks, and that's really the deal. Download that, save this for life, and grab your guitar because we can walk through this together. I will be showing the tabs, but it might be helpful for you to have it in front of you, whether it's a printout or just up on another window on your computer, your laptop, whatever. All right. If you do find it helpful, of course, like and subscribe. That's helpful for me. Okay, let's jump in. Before I show you any licks, something that's really important with Stevie Ray Vaughan's playing that should almost be a precursor is, really kind of aggressive picking. It helps things sound swampy, gives it that grit without necessarily needing to get any specific pedals. Obviously, he had his own gear, things like that. But I find that if you just give it some oomph when you're picking and give it some, nasty vibrato, you can really get a great tone. So, right there, you don't have to start up here to be aggressive, but something that feels fast, sharp, right? And then ends with a vibrato that's big and gives some oomph to those notes. So I am really pulling down almost to the point where I'm trying to bend to the next note in a downward motion, right? And it'll be up to you to kind of dial in what's the right amount for you and what sounds like him. So that might not be the exact emphasis I'm giving when I'm playing in kind of a jam solo scenario, but that's where you can start, right? Just tugging down and hitting the rest of that little lick. We can call that lick 1. Right, so hitting that G string on the 5th fret, pulling from 7 to 5, hitting 7 on the A string, and then hammering from 5 to 7, all of that on the D string. And same thing with the vibrato on the ring finger. I'm like yanking on the string, all right? So keep that in mind. That's basically, we can call that, I guess, the first 2 techniques, right? Be aggressive. Not every single pick, not every single stroke, but when the situation calls for it, that kind of swampy sound, that gritty sound can oftentimes just come from a really aggressive pick, giving it a sharpness that, cuts through the other instruments, cuts through the mix, as you might have heard people say, and then, getting that vibrato. So aggressive with your pick, aggressive with your vibrato. Right? And you can isolate that. Again, like I said, I'm going to show you how you can bring that into your solos and kind of give you a solo scenario so you can see how these ideas can be put into solos. But you can just practice that, just that little lick, that little phrase for 3 to 5 minutes to really get that down and work on that technique and play with your amp settings, play with your guitar settings. I find on a Strat, if I, get some drive, get some overdrive going, turn up the gain. If I'm on that, neck middle pickup, I can get an interesting Stevie Ray Vaughan tone just using the, I said overdrive. You don't have to even bring in a pedal, turn up the gain, and Yeah, bring in the neck middle pickup. And right there, you can get a nice little Stevie Ray Vaughan tone. Okay, so there's lick 1, there's phrase 1. All right, let's bring in raking now with our second lick. So raking is where we mute a few strings on an upstroke before we hit our desired string. So I'm going to show you a lick where we rake into the G string, muting the high E and the B string, and then we rake into the D string, muting the high E, the B, and the G string. All right, and it requires us to create a bit of a soft bar with our index or ring so that these notes sound like they're being scraped as opposed to ringing out clearly. All right, so let's hit the lick and you'll see what I mean, and you'll have some time to play around with it. So there's the lick, there's the phrase, similar ending, you know, how we cap it off to our first phrase, first lick that had us reviewing, you know, aggressive picking and vibrato. And that's just, you know, keeping things, you know, consistent. That little phrase is something you'll see that will be really handy as a place to take a break when you're soloing and noodling around. And I would almost consider that first phrase like a little bonus because hard picking and vibrato is kind of baked into the rest of the techniques and is important constantly. So it's in constant use, whereas we're going to continue to go over, right? This is raking, we'll have some sweep picking, and we'll have, you know, a really interesting bend technique. But the vibrato, the hard picking is kind of baked into almost all of the playing. All right, so raking, as I was saying, we're scraping a few strings. So we're creating this soft bar with the index finger on the high E and the B string before we hit the G. So you almost want to make contact right at the perfect moment. Right? You don't necessarily need to be pressing down the entire time, but as you're about to make contact with the G string, you press and you give that, you know, final kind of stroke up. All right? And we're hammering onto the 7th fret. This is all centered around an A blues, right? So again, when I show you the progression and how to, you know, solo here, this is all on an A blues, but of course you can move these shapes around. These are all the, you know, basic pentatonic, the most simple pentatonic shape we all learned super early on. So I'm hammering from 5 to 7 on the G string to get things going. Then I'm scraping up, hitting the G on the upstroke and then the D on the downstroke. All right, so I know earlier I said we're going to be raking from the G and the D. The D note is just the emphasis on the second way through, so both of them really are rakes to the G string, all right? And then we're finishing off with simple enough, right? 5 on the D string, 7 on the A string, 7 on the D string. Same thing as the last, you know, phrase, the last lick. It's going to take some time to accumulate this skill and get it down to a place where it sounds really good and makes you think, oh yeah, I do sound a little bit like Stevie Ray Vaughan. You're going to want to record yourself, right? Because sometimes when we're playing and we're not actually watching ourselves back, we're like, yeah, I'm in a groove. I'm feeling great. I'm sounding awesome. And then you watch it back and you're like, that could be a little bit cleaner. You know, that's not the greatest technique ever. So you're going to want to do that, get some feedback for yourself. But same thing, you know, take a few minutes to work on this. If this is a skill you really want to accumulate, you might want to go 10, 15 minutes on each one of these to really nail it down and hammer the skill. All right. But there's lick 2, there's phrase 2. You know, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on each piece other than the skill itself. Look at the tabs, go over them, review them for yourself. And they're small enough licks and phrases where it shouldn't be too brutal to work through them on your own. And this will really level you up when you do go to the Stevie Ray Vaughan songbook and you've got these more complicated solos. Well, the techniques are going to be baked in, and now you just need to learn the notes and listen for what techniques he's using in which scenario. All right. So lick 3, we are going to work on bending. So there's the third lick, the third phrase. There's actually a few bends going on. There's 3 bends going on. The first 2 are those first 2 notes. We're bending the 10th fret of the high E to the 12th fret. And when we bring it down, we're not bringing it down to the exact starting position. We're keeping it a little sharp. So there's a slight bend. And then as we come down to that, you know, main position we're in, we're bending on the 7th fret of the G string and skipping the B string and going to the high E. And that's a common little phrase that Stevie Ray Vaughan uses a lot. You can definitely hear it in Texas Flood a ton. But again, if you go through his songbook and his various albums, you'll hear that a decent amount. And same goes for the beginning of that lick. So again, we're bending from 10 to 12. All right, and when we come down, we're gonna hit the string again, but we're not. Notice I'm still maintaining a little bit of a bend. It's sharp. Right, so bending up, bringing it down as you're hitting that string, as you're hitting that note. And then we're going 8 on the high E, 10 on the B string. Right, so it stays sharp. That's really important. It adds this interesting flavor. So here it is coming all the way back down to the 10th fret. Different. And you can hear that SRV, accent on that bend. Then we're having this, quick hit of the 8th fret on the B string, sliding. Now you can, because of the positioning of your fingers, you can slide from 10 down to 7 on the G string. It doesn't really matter. The idea, because that doesn't really work in the scale, the 10th fret, you're sliding so fast, you're not really gonna hear it, right? Technically it's the 9th fret, but because you're starting the slide basically as you're hitting, you're not necessarily gonna hear that aspect. From there we pull off, right? And then that leads us into that finishing phrase where we bend 7. It's a quick bend. We're not bending all the way up to 9. We're barely even bending up to 8. Right? It's just a quick bend, skipping the B string, high E, and, to 5 on the G string. So, and then you can bring in that element, from the first lick, and now you're starting to connect them. That's going to be a piece when we bring everything together. But again, high E, just to kind of hit this one, because I think this one can be funky. Big bend, keep it sharp. So there's the third phrase, the third lick. The final technique is what I would categorize it as like sweep picking, but it's basically his signature phrase, so that, right? Those first 3 notes are all downstrokes. So that's kind of the technique here, is the sweep picking of those notes. Right? That sounds a little bit more Chuck Berry-ish, but when you put in the Stevie Ray context and you kind of put his little accents on it, it is very blatantly SRV. So the lick is going to be this. We're going to change that a little bit. And here is lick number 4, and this will give you the 4 really great techniques of Stevie Ray Vaughan's. So there's the 4th phrase, the 4th lick. I'm kind of interchanging those because I think they're small enough where they're really more phrases than anything, but I don't know, teach their own. I could also see myself describing these as small licks as well. So there it is, small bend, just like that last, the ending to the last lick, small bend on the 7th fret of the G string. We're not, bringing it all the way up to 9. We're not even necessarily bringing it up to 8. Almost like an upward vibrato, if you want to think about it like that. Then we've got a quick, right? It's all downstrokes, 5 and 5 on the B and high E, right? Then we're going to pull. We're going to go back to the B string. We're going to pull from 8 to 5. And those quick pulls are important in that signature lick. Sometimes he bends up. But in this scenario, we're going to pull quickly. And then that's where we kind of end things before we slide up. So 5, 5, and then 3, hammer pull from 3 to 4 on the high E. And then we're going to slide up from 8 to 10 on the B string. And remember the vibrato, if you pull it too far down, you're going to pull it off the neck. So just be careful with that, that vibrato here. Maybe a little bit more control than up here where you're yanking down and you have all this space. You're not going to pull it off the neck. All right, but you got to alternate pick. Once you're done with this, you've got to get back to some alternate picking to make that really efficient. But those first 3 notes, it's basically a sweep pick, down, down, down. Just like the previous 4 licks, you're going to want to take your time to really nail this, all right? You know, take this away from a backing track. I'm about to show you things with a backing track, but you don't have to start there. 5 to 10 minutes on each lick will really help you refine the skills and then bring in the backing track. All right, don't try to get this while you're putting it, you know, inside of a solo scenario. Get it on its own and then bring it in to a solo scenario, all right? I'm gonna leave it right there and I'm gonna show you now, you can watch my hands as I use these licks, these phrases to create a solo. So not only do you have the technique now, you can see how you can bring them into a solo scenario. There might be some flourishes and things like that that I go beyond the licks, but you will see the core licks and the core elements in the solo I'm about to show you. So keep watching, like and subscribe, and enjoy using this on your own and getting a little bit of that Stevie Ray Vaughan flavor into your own playing. All right, here we go.